The morning sun stretched lazily over the red clay roofs of Umuse, painting the village in gold and light. Smoke curled from kitchen fires, the air filled with the scent of roasted yams and laughter. Goats bleated in the distance, and the rhythmic pounding of yam echoed like a drumbeat of life. It was one of those mornings that made people thank the gods just for being alive. At the edge of the village stood a small hut, humble but neat and full of quiet grace. This was Amara's home. The widow of a man who died too young, she lived alone now, her only wealth being her kindness. Her days were simple, tending her small garden, fetching water and helping those in need. She never complained, never raised her voice. Yet somehow she was seen. Not because she was rich, but because her spirit shone like morning dew. The children of the village loved her most. Every dawn they came running to her door shouting, "Mama Amara, tell us a story." She would laugh softly and wave them in, handing out pieces of roasted cassava she had saved for them. Her laughter was gentle like the sound of a stream, the kind that eased even tired hearts. As she worked that morning carrying her clay pot to the stream, a group of village women passed by. Their wrappers were bright, their jewelry loud. Among them was Ngozi, the most beautiful and prideful of them all. Her lips curved slightly as her eyes fell on Amara. "Still alone, Amara?" she asked, pretending to sound sympathetic. "Some women are meant to have homes. Others, just ashes." The women around her chuckled. But Amara didn't flinch. She simply smiled and said softly, "Even ashes can feed the soil." Then she lifted her pot and walked on, her steps slow but sure. There was something about her that made even her silence feel like a victory. Later, in the market square, Amara sold her herbs and fruits, carefully arranged, tied in leaves, and always cheaper than anyone else's. The buyers came to her first, not because her goods were the best, but because they trusted her heart. She greeted each one with warmth, never rushing, never scowling. But in the shadows of the market stall, Ngozi watched, her smile thin and bitter. "Who does she think she is?" she muttered to her friend. "Always smiling like she's blessed. She's just a widow, yet people treat her like a queen." Her friend shrugged. "Maybe it's her heart. Or maybe," Ngozi hissed, her eyes narrowing, "she charms them. I've heard whispers, she mixes herbs with prayers." The seed of envy had been planted. As the day folded into afternoon, Amara walked home, her basket light, her heart full. Children waved, elders nodded. She stopped by the village shrine, placed 2 cowries on the altar and whispered, "Thank you, ancestors. For peace, for breath, for today." A warm breeze brushed her face. Somewhere far above, a bird cried, long and low. It was the kind of sound the elders would call a warning. She turned slightly, sensing eyes watching from the distance, but saw only the stillness of her hut, its walls glowing under the fading sun. She smiled again, dismissing the chill that ran through her chest. That night, she sat by her small fire, stirring her pot of soup, humming softly to herself. Flames danced across her face, reflecting in her eyes like tiny stars. Peace had made its home in her heart. But peace, as the elders say, is a fragile guest. It never stays long in a world where envy is awake. And somewhere across the village, in a courtyard lit by jealousy and pride, Ngozi whispered to her companions, "Let's see how long her peace lasts." The sound of her laughter broke the night's calm, faint, sharp, and cruel. The first spark had been lit, though no one yet saw the fire it would become. The next morning the air in Umuse was strangely heavy. The dawn mist clung to the ground longer than usual, and even the birds seemed to sing quieter. Amara woke early as always, her movements graceful and unhurried. She swept her courtyard, humming softly, a melody her mother once sang, unaware that her peace was being watched, weighed, and envied. Across the village square, Ngozi sat with her sisters-in-law, grinding pepper and gossip with equal strength. Her voice was sharp, cutting through the quiet like a knife. "Have you heard?" she began, pretending to whisper. "Amara's herbs are working wonders. Yesterday the chief's wife went to her hut, and now they say she's been healed of her fever. Maybe it's not herbs at all. Maybe it's juju." Her sisters-in-law gasped, their eyes wide with the excitement of fresh scandal. "But Amara is a good woman," one said. Ngozi's lips twisted. "Good? Or clever? How can a widow with no man and no money live so well? Think. She must be using something." The whisper traveled faster than wind. By midday half the market was murmuring the same story, "Amara uses charms." Some said she called spirits in her garden. Others swore her smile could bend men's hearts. Amara felt the change before she heard the words. In the market, people who once greeted her warmly now turned their faces away. Some paid without looking at her. Others simply walked past. She noticed. Of course she noticed, but she said nothing. That evening as she returned home with her small basket, a group of children ran up to her, but their mother shouted from behind, "Chinello! Leave that woman alone. Don't touch her." The words stung more than a slap. The children froze, confused, before slowly backing away. Amara stood still, heart heavy. The world, which had once opened to her with kindness, was now folding shut. Later she sat by her hut, watching the orange sky fade into blue. Her hands trembled slightly as she shelled beans into a calabash. She whispered to herself, "When people fear what they don't understand, they turn kindness into danger." But Amara did not curse them. She did not run to defend herself. Instead she prayed for their peace. Far across the village in Ngozi's compound, drums were beating. The night was alive with chatter and laughter. Ngozi's husband had returned from the city with fine cloth and gold earrings, gifts that glittered under the firelight. As she danced, her bracelets clinking like coins, Ngozi's eyes flicked toward the distant dark where Amara's hut stood. "Let her see what true blessing looks like," she whispered to herself. "Let her know she's nothing." But envy, when it grows unchecked, always finds fire to feed on. A week later, a sudden sickness swept through the village. Chickens died, goats weakened, and the stream's water turned muddy. The elders gathered, muttering of curses, spirits, and wrath. Then one old woman, bent, wrinkled, with a tongue sharp as pepper, said what everyone feared to say. It started when Amara helped the chief's wife. She must have angered the spirits. The crowd murmured in agreement. By the next morning, people gathered outside Amara's hut, whispering, pointing, crossing themselves. Her once loving neighbors now looked at her with fear. When she stepped outside, a woman spat on the ground. "Witch," she hissed under her breath. Amara froze. Her heart thudded in her chest, but her voice stayed calm. "I am not a witch," she said softly. "I only heal what I can." But the crowd was restless. Suspicion is a fire that feeds on its own smoke. That night, Ngozi sat with her husband, her eyes glinting like coals. "You heard what they say," she murmured. "The sickness, it came from her." Her husband frowned. "You think Amara?" Ngozi cut him off. "I know it. And if she stays, the gods will punish us all." The man sighed. "Then let the elders decide." Ngozi smiled. That was exactly what she wanted. The next day, a messenger was sent to summon Amara to the village square. She arrived quietly, her wrapper neat, her head bowed. The elders sat in a circle, drums silent, eyes hard. The chief cleared his throat. "Amara," he began, "you have been accused of calling evil upon this village. They say your herbs are not from the earth but from the dead. Do you deny it?" Amara looked around her, at the faces she once fed, the children she once taught, the friends who now looked away. Her voice was steady, though her heart trembled. "I deny it, my lord. I serve no darkness. I only heal." But the crowd murmured, "Lies. She lies." Ngozi stepped forward, her voice dripping with false sorrow. "Chief, I saw her myself one night, whispering to the wind." Her hands glowed in the moonlight. Gasps filled the air. Amara's mouth fell open. "That's not true," she said, tears stinging her eyes. "I was praying for rain, for the village." The chief's gaze was unreadable. "Then the gods will judge." The drums began again, low, ominous. The trial had begun. And deep within her chest, Amara felt something shift, the first spark of a fire she did not yet know she carried. The air in the village square was tense, thick like smoke before a storm. Torches flickered against the darkening sky, casting shadows that danced like restless spirits. The crowd gathered, their murmurs sharp and heavy with fear. Amara stood at the center, barefoot, calm on the outside, trembling within. The chief sat high on his carved stool, the elders to his right and left. Beside them, Ngozi knelt in mock humility, head bowed, face painted with fake sorrow. Her husband stood behind her, uneasy but silent, silence that would haunt him for years. A goat bleated somewhere in the distance. The drums stopped. "Amara," the chief began again, his deep voice echoing across the open square. "You have been accused of witchcraft. Your hands bring healing, but now sickness stalks our homes. Tell us, who sent you?" Amara's voice came soft but steady. "No one sent me. I serve life, not death. I use only what the earth provides. I pray for light, not darkness." A murmur of disbelief rippled through the crowd. "She lies," a man shouted from the back. "My goat died after she passed my compound." Another woman stepped forward, clutching her baby. The night she visited, my child cried till dawn. She must be the cause. Ngozi's eyes gleamed, the poison she had planted was blooming perfectly. The oldest elder, a frail man with white hair and a staff carved with ancestral marks, leaned forward. Amara, he said gravely, if your heart is pure, then no harm shall come to you. But if it is not, he raised his hand toward the crowd. Then let the fire reveal the truth. The villagers gasped. A trial by fire, an ancient test, few survived, guilty or not. 2 young men stepped forward carrying dried wood. They built a small pyre before the crowd. Sparks rose as they lit it, the flames crackling, alive, hungry. Amara looked at the fire, and for a moment she saw herself in it. A life that burned quietly, giving warmth, yet now threatened to consume her whole. She bowed her head. If the gods are just, they will protect me. The elder nodded. Then step forward, daughter of the earth. The crowd leaned in as Amara walked toward the flame. Her wrapper brushed the dusty ground. The heat kissed her face. Her heart pounded like a drum in her chest. Behind her, Ngozi whispered to her sister, now she'll learn not to rise above her place. But as Amara reached the fire, something strange happened. The wind, which had been still moments ago, began to stir. It swept through the square, carrying with it the smell of rain. The flames danced higher, then bent sideways as though bowing before her. The villagers gasped. Amara's eyes filled with tears. She raised her hands slowly and stepped into the circle of light, not into the fire itself, but close enough that the heat should have scorched her skin. Yet it didn't. The flames hissed, and parted. The fire moved as though it recognized her. Someone screamed. Witch! The fire obeys her. Panic broke. Mothers grabbed their children. Men backed away. Even the chief shifted uneasily on his stool. Only one person smiled, Ngozi. Her voice rose above the chaos. You see, even the fire fears her. She is cursed. Amara fell to her knees. No, it is not fear, it is mercy. The gods are showing you I am innocent. But her words drowned in noise. Fear had already taken root. The elder struck his staff on the ground. Enough. The fire speaks, and the people have heard. You are to be cast out, Amara. Leave before dawn, or the flames will finish what they started. A hush fell. Amara turned to the crowd, faces she had once loved, faces now twisted by fear. Her eyes met Ngozi's. The smile there was cold as stone. Tears welled up but didn't fall. You cannot burn what is pure, Amara whispered, her voice trembling but strong. You can take my home but not my spirit. She turned and walked away, the crowd parting before her. The torches flickered wildly, the smoke curling into the sky like a warning. Behind her, Ngozi's laughter echoed faintly, cruel, triumphant. That night, Amara packed her small bundle, a piece of cloth, a calabash, a few herbs, and the necklace her mother gave her. She looked one last time at her hut, the garden she tended, the small clay pot where she kept her dreams. Then, as the first drops of rain began to fall, she whispered to the dark sky. If they wish to see my end in the fire, then let the fire see my beginning. Lightning cracked across the clouds, and the rain fell harder, washing the dust, cooling the earth, and baptizing her exile. The night Amara left the village, the world seemed to hold its breath. The air was thick with the scent of wet earth after the rain, and the moon hid behind swollen clouds. Each step she took away from the village echoed faintly, the mud swallowing her footprints as if trying to erase her existence. Her heart was heavy, not with fear but with disbelief. The same people she had healed, the same mothers who had once blessed her hands, now they had turned their backs on her. Her feet ached, her wrapper clung to her skin, and yet she did not stop. The wind pushed against her the same way her people had, but she kept walking. By dawn, the rain had slowed, and the forest opened before her like a gate. Birds called to one another in distant trees, and the mist curled low across the ground. She found shelter beneath an old irako tree, its roots twisted like the arms of a guardian. She sat there, trembling, her hands cupping her face. She thought of her mother, of the songs she used to sing about the spirits that guided the innocent. The earth never forgets her children, her mother would say. Amara closed her eyes and whispered, then let her remember me now. Her stomach growled. She had not eaten since the previous day. The small calabash she carried held only a few dried fruits and herbs. She chewed them slowly, tasting bitterness and memory. As the day grew warmer, she wandered through the forest, gathering leaves, searching for streams, tracing her path by the sun. Every sound, the rustle of leaves, the cry of distant hyenas, reminded her how alone she was. Yet somewhere deep inside she felt a stirring, the same calm she felt when healing others. That evening as the sun dipped behind the trees, the sky darkened again. Clouds rolled in heavy and low. The first drop of rain struck her arm, cold, deliberate. Then another. And then 1,000. The storm came suddenly, roaring winds lashing rain, thunder shaking the trees. She ran, clutching her bundle to her chest, her wrapper clinging to her legs. The trees swayed like giants, their branches tearing at the sky. Lightning split the darkness, flashing her path in fragments. She tripped on a root and fell hard into the mud. Her bundle scattered, the calabash rolled away, cracking open. The necklace her mother gave her slid out, half buried in the dirt. She crawled to it, clutching it close, tears mixing with rain. "Why?" she cried out to the storm. "Why take everything from me? My people, my name, my home, why?" The thunder answered with a deep, rolling growl that shook her bones. The rain poured harder, blurring her vision. But in that chaos she felt it, something more than wind and water. A pulse, a rhythm, a voice carried within the storm. It wasn't angry. It wasn't cruel. It was ancient, and it whispered her name. Amara. She froze. Her breath caught. Lightning flashed, and for a heartbeat she thought she saw a figure in the rain. A tall, luminous woman made of mist and light, her eyes glowing like burning coals. "Do not fear the fire," the voice murmured, echoing from everywhere and nowhere. "It is only a mirror of what you carry inside." Amara's tears stilled. Her heart pounded in awe and confusion. "Who are you?" she whispered into the storm. The wind swirled around her, pressing her wrapper to her skin, lifting her hair. The voice grew softer, like the hum of rain against leaves. "Rise from what they burned. The ashes are not your ending, they are your crown." And then the storm broke open with a final flash of light, brilliant, blinding, and silence followed. When Amara woke, the rain had stopped. The forest steamed with morning heat, and mist hung low like smoke. But the ground around her was dry, untouched by mud or flood. She looked at her palms. They were clean, her skin glowing faintly in the sunlight. Her necklace shimmered faintly, the small cowrie shells glinting like embers. She rose slowly, strength returning to her limbs. Something inside her had shifted. The fear that once filled her chest was gone. In its place was a deep, still fire, quiet but unbreakable. Amara lifted her face to the sky. The wind brushed her cheek gently as though answering her. She whispered, "If they wanted to destroy me, they have only taught me how to begin again." The forest seemed to hum in agreement. Birds sang again. The light filtered through the trees, falling in golden streaks over her shoulders, not the cruel fire of accusation, but the soft fire of rebirth. Amara turned and began to walk, not back toward the village yet, but forward, deeper into the wilderness. Somewhere she knew her path would rise again. And behind her, faint on the wind, came that whisper once more. "Rise, daughter of ashes." Days turned into nights, and nights blurred into dawns as Amara wandered deeper into the wilderness. The land was vast and wild, untamed, a place that belonged to no one and everything all at once. The earth beneath her feet was soft from rain, and the scent of wet grass followed her wherever she went. She survived on the roots she could find, fruits that grew along the forest edges, and water from hidden streams that trickled through the rocks. Each step tested her body, but something within her had awakened, a stillness, a strength that grew like a slow flame. When fear whispered, she listened, but it no longer ruled her. The voice she had heard in the storm lingered in her mind, like a heartbeat that wasn't her own. "Rise from what they burned." Those words became her prayer, her rhythm, her reason. One afternoon, as she rested beneath a massive baobab tree, she noticed the forest had changed. The air was quieter, thicker, as though watching her. The trees here were older, roots like serpents, leaves as broad as shields. Birds did not sing, even the wind seemed cautious. She rose, clutching her bundle, and followed a faint path that wound through the ancient trees. As she walked, she heard something, faint at first, then clearer. A voice. Not human but not quite the wind either. It hummed through the air, low and deep, rising and falling like breath. She paused, her heart quickening. "Who's there?" she called softly. No answer, only that hum. She followed it, step by step, until the trees parted, revealing a small clearing. In its center stood a circle of stones, blackened and smooth as if touched by centuries of fire. Inside the circle, a faint mist curled upward, forming a spiral. Amara stepped closer, her eyes wide. When she reached the edge, the hum deepened, a sound that vibrated through her chest. Then suddenly the mist shifted and shaped itself into a faint outline, a woman's form, tall and regal, her face hidden by light. Amara fell to her knees instinctively. "Are you the one from the storm?" she whispered. The figure did not move, but the air around her shimmered with energy. The voice came again, not from her mouth but from everywhere, from the trees, the earth, the stones. "The storm carried my voice. The fire remembers my name. You have been called Child of Ashes." Amara bowed her head. "I'm no one. They cast me out. My name is cursed among my people." The figure's glow pulsed gently. "The names of the living mean nothing to the ancestors. It is what you rise from that defines you. You have walked through fire and rain. You have seen betrayal and chosen mercy. That is why the storm spared you." Amara's throat tightened. "But why me? What do you want from me?" There was a pause, a silence so complete that she could hear the beat of her own heart. Then the voice came, softer but sharper. "The world will burn again. This time, you will decide what rises from its ashes." The mist brightened suddenly and Amara shielded her eyes. When she looked again, something lay at her feet, a small gourd carved with symbols that glowed faintly like embers. "Take it," the voice said. "Within it is what they tried to destroy, your spirit unbroken. Drink from it when you are ready to rise." Amara reached out and touched the gourd. It was warm, pulsing faintly like a living heart. She lifted it to her lips, and as the cool liquid touched her tongue, the world around her changed. The trees shimmered. The air seemed to fold into itself. She saw visions, her village, her people, her husband looking lost, her home in ruins, the flames dancing again. But this time she was not afraid. The flames did not consume, they circled her like a crown. Her body trembled. She gasped, her breath forming mist. Her skin tingled with heat and light, her eyes reflecting the same glow that had surrounded the spirit. When the vision faded, the gourd had vanished, leaving only a faint ember mark on her palm, shaped like a spiral. She looked at it in awe. The mark pulsed once, then stilled. For a long moment she simply sat there, breathing, feeling the strange calm that followed. The forest around her seemed alive again. Birds sang, the wind whispered through the leaves. The storm's energy had settled within her. That night, Amara made a small fire, the first she had dared to make since the night of her banishment. She sat beside it, watching the flames sway gently. They no longer frightened her. They felt familiar, almost protective. She whispered into the night, "They took everything from me. But they cannot take what burns inside." The wind stirred the flames in answer. Amara smiled faintly, lifting her gaze to the stars breaking through the darkness above. Somewhere beyond those trees, her village still slept in ignorance, still ruled by fear and pride. But she was no longer the woman they cast out. Something greater had awakened. And when the time came, she knew, she would return, not as the broken healer they had burned, but as the flame that could not die. The rains ended after 7 long nights, and the skies above the forest cleared like a curtain lifting from the world. The sunlight poured through the canopy, sharp and golden white, cutting across Amara's skin as she stood at the edge of the clearing. Her heart was steady now, her steps deliberate. She no longer walked as one exiled, she walked as one reborn. Her clothes were patched and worn, her wrapper tied firm around her waist, but there was something new in her eyes, a light that neither pain nor rejection could dim. The spiral mark on her palm glowed faintly in the morning light, warm to the touch, as if the fire still whispered beneath her skin. As she began her journey back toward the village, the forest seemed to part before her. The wind moved with her steps, birds followed her path, calling as though guiding her home. Every leaf that fell, every breeze that touched her face seemed to carry a message: it is time. By dusk, she reached the familiar outskirts of her homeland. From afar, she could see the silhouette of the village, the same clay huts, the same watchtower, the faint smoke rising from cooking fires. But something was different. There was quietness where laughter once lived, tension where joy had been. She hid behind the trees watching. A group of villagers hurried past, their voices filled with panic. "Another sickness has come," one said breathlessly. "The children cough all night." "The healer we called from across the river said it's a curse," said another. "Ever since Amara was cast out, misfortune has followed us." Amara's heart clenched, but she did not step forward yet. The wound of their betrayal was still raw, not because they had doubted her, but because she had loved them despite it. She turned her face to the wind and whispered, "If the gods will it, I will go when they call, not before." She made camp near the river that ran close to the village border. That night, she watched the reflection of the moon shimmer on the water and thought of all that had changed. Her body was scarred, her heart healed by storms, and yet a strange peace had taken root. The spirit from the mist had told her she would decide what rose from the ashes, and now the ashes called her name. The next morning, cries echoed from the village square. Amara rose instantly. Smoke, thick and black, coiled upward in the distance. She ran toward it, her feet moving faster than thought. When she reached the village gate, she saw chaos. A hut was burning, not hers but another's. Villagers screamed and ran for water. The fire leapt from roof to roof, wild and merciless. Children cried. Old women stumbled trying to flee. Without thinking, Amara sprinted into the flames. "Amara," someone screamed. "Stay back. You'll die." But she didn't stop. Her wrapper caught sparks, her hair whipped in the heat, and the spiral mark on her palm began to glow brighter, so bright it cut through the smoke. She lifted her hands toward the sky, her voice strong and clear. "Spirits of storm and fire, I am your child. Spare them as you spared me." The wind answered. The same voice she had heard in the wilderness seemed to rise again, not in words but in the roar of the elements. The clouds rolled and suddenly the blue sky turning gray. Thunder rumbled like drums of judgment. And then rain. A torrent. The fire hissed and died in seconds. The villagers watched in stunned silence as the rain poured down, soaking the ashes, cooling the earth. When the last flame disappeared, Amara stood in the center of the smoke, drenched but unburned. Steam rose around her, curling like a crown. She turned slowly. Faces stared at her, faces that had once judged, mocked, condemned. "Amara," someone whispered. "She lives. She walks through fire." She called the storm. Whispers turned into murmurs. Murmurs became awe. And then silence. From the crowd, the chief stepped forward, his old hands trembling. His voice shook as he spoke. "You should have perished that night, yet the fire obeys you still. Who are you now, Amara?" Her eyes met his. They were calm, steady, luminous. "I am the same woman you cast out," she said softly. "Only now, I know what your fire could not destroy." Behind the chief, Ngozi watched with disbelief. Her face twisted with fear and rage. "You think a trick of wind makes you blessed?" she spat. "You are still a curse upon us." Amara turned her gaze on her. The air seemed to grow colder. "A curse?" she said quietly. "No, Ngozi. I am the answer to one." Before Ngozi could respond, the thunder rolled again, low and deep like the voice of the gods themselves. The villagers dropped to their knees instinctively. The rain softened to a drizzle and light broke through the clouds. It struck Amara, bathing her in gold and silver hues. Steam rose from her shoulders, her skin shimmered. To the people, it looked as though the fire itself bowed before her. She looked at the village, her village, and said, "You burned my home, but I am still here. You cast me out, but I found the voice of the storm. I came not to destroy you but to remind you, truth cannot be buried in ash." No one spoke. No one moved. Even Ngozi lowered her eyes. The chief stepped closer and bowed deeply, something he had never done before. "Amara," he said, his voice breaking, "forgive us. We were blind." She hesitated, her heart still scarred, but then she nodded. "The fire that destroys can also cleanse," she said softly. "Let this be our cleansing." The people wept, out of guilt, out of awe, out of relief. The rain washed away their tears. Amara turned her face to the sky, letting the droplets fall freely. The storm that once threatened her had now become her ally. The fire that once sought to consume her now burned within her, not to destroy but to heal. And as the villagers watched, she lifted her hands, whispering a prayer of gratitude, not for revenge but for renewal. The storm's whisper answered in the wind, soft and sure. "Rise, daughter of ashes. The world remembers your name." The next sunrise came quietly. Mist hovered above the thatched roofs, and the smell of wet earth filled the village air. The storm had passed, leaving behind a world that looked new, soft, silver, reborn. Amara stood by the riverbank where she once wept in exile. Now her reflection was calm. The woman in the water looked stronger, older, but also strangely serene. Behind her, the sound of footsteps came, hesitant, dragging. When she turned, she saw Ngozi. The proud woman who once laughed as flames devoured Amara's hut now walked with her head bowed, her wrapper torn, her face streaked with dried tears. "Why are you here?" Amara asked quietly, her tone not angry, just tired. Ngozi swallowed hard. "Because the gods have turned their eyes against me," she whispered. "My son lies sick. The healers say no herbs can save him. I have nothing left to offer them." For a long moment neither woman spoke. The river murmured softly between them. Ngozi's voice trembled as she continued, "They say your hands carry the storm's mercy. Please, Amara, if there is still a heart inside you, forgive me. Save him." Amara looked at her, this woman who had once mocked her, who had stolen her peace and burned her life to ashes. The fire of vengeance that once lived in her chest flickered faintly, like an old ember fighting for breath. She could have turned away. She could have said, "Now you know how it feels to beg." But she didn't. Instead, she took a slow breath and walked toward Ngozi. "Take me to him," she said. When they entered Ngozi's hut, the air was heavy with fear. A small boy lay on a woven mat, his breathing shallow, his body trembling. His eyes were half open, glazed with fever. The sight pierced Amara's heart. She knelt beside him and touched his forehead. The spiral mark on her palm glowed faintly, a warmth like sunlight after rain. Ngozi sank to her knees beside them, sobbing. "I said things I can never take back," she cried. "I was jealous because people saw goodness in you that I could not see in myself. I thought destroying you would silence what I envied. But the gods showed me, fire burns the hand that sets it too." Amara closed her eyes, her lips moving in silent prayer. Then she whispered softly to the child, "Rest, little one. The storm that once took your mother's peace will now give you back your breath." She placed both hands over his chest. The air in the hut shifted, soft wind brushed through the doorway though the air outside was still. A faint sound, almost like distant thunder, rumbled in the distance. The boy gasped, then coughed, and slowly, his breathing steadied. His eyes fluttered open, clear now, filled with life. Ngozi covered her mouth in shock. Tears spilled freely down her cheeks. "He's breathing," she whispered. "Oh, by the ancestors, he's breathing." Amara stood, her face calm, eyes still faintly glowing. "He will live," she said quietly. "But remember, Ngozi, mercy is not weakness. It is the fire that does not destroy." Ngozi fell to her knees, clutching Amara's feet. "I wronged you, Amara. I deserve nothing but your hatred." Amara's gaze softened. "Hatred kept me alive once," she said, "but mercy will let me live." She helped Ngozi to her feet. "Rise. The storm has passed. Do not call me a spirit. Do not call me cursed. I am only a woman who learned to walk through fire without letting it turn her to ash." Outside, the villagers had gathered again, whispering. When they saw Ngozi emerge holding her son, alive, and Amara walking behind her, radiant in the morning light, a murmur spread through the crowd. "She healed him. She saved Ngozi's child. She truly carries the god's hand." The chief stepped forward again, his staff trembling in his grip. "Amara," he said solemnly, "our people have long forgotten that true power lies not in punishment but in forgiveness. You have shown us the way back." Amara shook her head. "No, chief. I only showed you what the fire tried to hide." From that day the village changed. The place once filled with suspicion and pride became a haven for those in need. The burned land where Amara's hut once stood was rebuilt into a house of healing, open to all. Travelers came from distant regions to see the woman who rose from smoke. But Amara never claimed to be a goddess. She lived simply, tending to the sick, teaching the young, speaking softly to those who carried pain. Sometimes on quiet nights she would sit outside and watch the horizon. She would remember the fire, not with hatred but gratitude. For in those flames she had found the truth of who she was. Ngozi visited often, bringing fruits, helping with chores, and never once lifting her head higher than Amara's. Over time they spoke not as enemies, but as women who had both been burned by pride, and both reborn by mercy. One evening as the sun dipped below the hills, Ngozi said softly, "Amara, they call you the Queen of Ashes now." Amara smiled faintly. "Then let them remember," she said, "that from ashes even the smallest spark can rise, if only it learns to forgive." A soft wind blew through the trees, carrying the scent of rain and wildflowers. Somewhere far beyond, thunder rolled like a heartbeat. And as the first stars appeared, the village rested, no longer cursed, no longer divided, but reborn beneath the grace of the woman who had once walked through fire and returned with mercy in her hands. Seasons passed. The village that once whispered Amara's name in fear now spoke it with reverence. Children grew up hearing her story at dusk, when the fires burned low and the stars began to dance. They called her the Fire Queen, not because she ruled over anyone, but because she had conquered the fire that once tried to consume her. Her house stood near the same river where she had once wept in despair. Now it was a place of healing, its walls made from sun-dried clay, its roof woven with palm leaves, and its yard always filled with the scent of herbs and laughter. The villagers came daily, some to seek cures, others to seek counsel. Amara never refused anyone. Her hands, once trembling with pain, now glowed with gentle purpose. Her eyes carried storms, not of anger but of strength. But beneath her calm, she often looked toward the hills beyond the village, the place where her burned house once stood. Sometimes when the wind shifted, she could still smell the faintest trace of smoke. It didn't haunt her anymore. It reminded her. One evening, as crimson twilight painted the sky, a group of travelers arrived. They came from distant lands, dusty, weary, and full of questions. Among them was a young woman who carried a small child on her back. She approached Amara and bowed deeply. "Are you the one they call the Fire Queen?" Amara smiled faintly. "I am Amara. The fire only made me see." The woman's voice trembled. "They say you can speak to the rain, that the wind bends to your will." Amara shook her head softly. "No. I learned only to listen, to the wind, to the pain, to what is hidden beneath the silence." The child on the woman's back stirred, coughing weakly. Amara reached out and touched his forehead, then whispered a prayer. The child's breathing steadied, his eyes fluttering open. Gasps filled the crowd. "She is blessed," someone murmured. "She carries the spirits of the ancestors." Amara only smiled. "I carry what they carried, endurance." That night the travelers stayed. As the fire crackled in the courtyard, the old chief, now frail and gray, sat beside her. His voice rasped like dry leaves. "Do you ever wonder, Amara," he asked, "why the gods chose you?" Amara looked into the flames. "Maybe they didn't choose me," she said quietly. "Maybe they just gave me fire so I would learn how to become light." The chief nodded slowly. "And now the village shines because of you." Amara turned to him, her expression gentle but firm. "No, chief. The village shines because it learned from the ashes. I am not the flame, only the spark that reminded everyone they could burn bright without burning others." The fire crackled again. Children gathered close, eyes wide, waiting for the story they loved most. And so, for the first time, Amara told it herself. She spoke of her days of laughter before the betrayal, of how her home was set ablaze and her tears mixed with rain. She told of the night when thunder answered her cries and fire bowed before her. She didn't tell it as a story of revenge, but as one of rebirth. "When the world burns your name," she said softly, "you can let it turn to ash, or you can write it again with smoke and rise above it." Her voice carried into the night, weaving through the stars. The children leaned in, their faces glowing in the firelight. The elders nodded silently, their hearts remembering. Later, when everyone had gone to sleep, Amara remained by the dying fire. A breeze lifted the ashes into the air, swirling them gently like whispers of memory. Then, out of the darkness, Ngozi approached, her face lined with years, her eyes humble but peaceful. She placed a small woven basket beside Amara. Inside were two carved figures, one of a woman kneeling, another of the same woman standing tall, wrapped in smoke. "I made these," Ngozi said softly, "to remind us what you taught, that the same fire that destroys can also refine." Amara took the carvings in her hands, smiling with quiet emotion. "You have learned well," she said. "And maybe one day they'll tell your story too." Ngozi shook her head. "No. They'll remember yours, because you showed us that forgiveness can be stronger than fire." Amara looked up at the stars. "Then let them remember not my name," she said, "but the light that came after the smoke." The night grew still. Crickets sang in the distance. A faint rumble of thunder echoed far away, not a warning but a promise. When dawn came, the village awoke to find a strange sight, a faint trail of smoke rising from Amara's courtyard, though no fire burned there. It shimmered in the morning sun, twisting gently into the shape of a crown before dissolving into the wind. And so the legend was born, of the Fire Queen, the woman who rose from ashes and taught her people that strength is not in revenge, but in the power to rebuild. Even generations later, mothers told their daughters, "When life burns you down, don't curse the flames. Rise from them, and let the world see your light." Years turned into decades. The village thrived in peace, guided by the lessons Amara had left behind. Her story had become more than a tale, it was a law of the heart. Every child born after the fire knew her name, and every home carried her mark, a small carving of a flame not as a warning but as a blessing. But peace, as the elders say, is a river, calm on the surface, yet always moving. And sometimes old storms find their way back to the shore. It began quietly, the sky grew restless again. The air thickened with heat and whispers. One afternoon, dark clouds gathered above the hills, rolling in faster than the farmers had ever seen. The birds went silent. Even the goats huddled near the huts. In the center of the village, Ngozi, now an old woman, watched the horizon with troubled eyes. She had spent her life protecting Amara's teachings, passing them to the next generation. But as the first drops of rain hit the dry earth, she felt something different, a presence that wasn't just weather but memory returning. She whispered, "It's her. The Fire Queen's storm has come again." The young villagers, those who had only heard the stories, came running. "Is it a curse?" one of them asked. "Has the fire come back for us?" Ngozi shook her head slowly. "No. It's not fire this time. It's a test." The rain began to fall harder, slashing through the wind. Lightning flashed across the sky, illuminating the mountains where Amara's old house had once stood. For a moment, it looked like smoke was rising again, but this time it wasn't destruction. It was light. Deep in the storm they heard a voice, faint but unmistakable, a whisper carried through the wind. "Remember what I taught you. Fire does not destroy those who walk through it with truth." Ngozi felt her knees weaken. She clutched her chest, tears mixing with the rain. "She's watching," she said. "She wants to see if we learned." The young ones huddled close as the thunder grew wild. One of them, a young woman named Adaora, looked up with fierce determination. She was Amara's great-granddaughter, though few knew it. She carried her ancestors' sharp eyes and calm strength. She stood up in the pouring rain, her voice rising above the chaos. "Everyone, don't run. Gather your fires, not to fight the storm but to welcome it." The villagers hesitated, confused. "Welcome it," someone shouted. "It will drown us." But Adaora ran into her hut and came out holding a single clay lantern, shielding the flame from the rain with her palm. When the Fire Queen faced her storm, she didn't curse the sky. She faced it, and it made her light stronger. Slowly, one by one, others followed. They lit their small fires, placing them outside their homes under woven shades. Soon, the whole village shimmered with hundreds of tiny flames glowing through the rain. Lightning cracked again, but it didn't strike the huts. Instead, it arced across the clouds, glowing like a crown above the village. The wind softened. The storm seemed to bow. Ngozi smiled faintly, her frail hands trembling. "She's here," she whispered. "The Fire Queen walks with her blood." Adaora looked toward the sky, her face illuminated by the flickering light. "If she rose from smoke," she said, "then we will rise from storms." The thunder answered her words not with fury but with rhythm, deep, echoing almost like drums. The villagers began to hum, then sing, an old melody once sung for Amara when she rebuilt her home. The sound carried far into the night, blending with the wind until it felt as though the earth itself was singing back. As the storm slowly faded, the rain eased into a mist. The clouds parted, revealing a bright silver moon. The fires still burned, not one of them extinguished. The village stood untouched. When morning came, the land glistened. The air smelled of new beginnings. The fields, once dry, sparkled with fresh water. And in the soft light of dawn, something shimmered near the old site of Amara's ruined home, a patch of green where a single flower had bloomed in the ash. Its petals were white with streaks of red and gold, as if kissed by both fire and rain. Ngozi and Adaora knelt before it. Ngozi whispered, "The Fire Queen blesses us still." Adaora touched the flower gently. "Then we'll keep her flame alive, not by burning but by growing." The villagers gathered, bowing their heads in reverence. Above them, the wind whispered again, a soft, maternal voice fading into the horizon. "When they come to end you, let them learn that light never dies." From that day on, whenever storms came, the people of the village didn't run. They placed their small fires outside, sang Amara's song, and watched the rain fall without fear. It became their ritual, their way of saying, "The Fire Queen still walks among us." And in the glow of every storm's end, when the mist cleared and the sun returned, a faint crown of light could be seen above the hills, a promise from Amara herself that no darkness would ever swallow her people again. Generations passed. The story of Amara, the Fire Queen, became the heartbeat of the village. What began as whispers around a single fire grew into a legacy sung across lands and carried in the wind. Her name became a symbol, not of tragedy but of triumph. And in every home, on every threshold, burned a small flame that never went out. By the time Adaora grew old, the world around them had changed. The village had become a town, its markets vibrant with color and sound, its people proud and united. Yet even amid the noise of progress, they never forgot who taught them to rebuild. Each year, when the first rains of the season arrived, They gathered in the square to celebrate the Festival of Light, a day to honor Amara's memory. The ceremony always began with silence. The oldest woman would step forward and light a single flame in the center of the crowd. The fire flickered, small and fragile, but as every villager lit their own candle from it, the light grew, spreading across the night until the entire village glowed. On this particular year, Adaora sat among the elders, her eyes misty but bright. The children danced barefoot in the mud, their laughter echoing into the night. The drums began, slow at first, then faster, until the rhythm pulsed like a living heartbeat. When the youngest girl, a child no older than 7, walked toward the flame, Adaora called her name softly. "Come here, Nena." The girl turned, her tiny face glowing from the firelight. "Yes, grandmother?" Adaora smiled, the wrinkles around her eyes deepening. "Do you know whose light this is?" Nena nodded proudly. "It's the light of the Fire Queen. And do you know why we keep it burning?" The child hesitated, thinking hard, then said, "Because she showed us that even when the world tries to burn us, we can rise brighter than before." Adaora laughed softly, tears welling in her eyes. "You are wiser than your years, little one." She took the child's hand, placed it gently over her heart and whispered, "Then promise me this, when I am gone, you'll tell her story not with sorrow but with pride." "I promise," Nena said solemnly. A hush fell over the crowd. The chief, gray-haired and regal, raised his staff and spoke, his voice carrying through the air. "Tonight we remember the one who rose from smoke. We remember Amara, whose fire still burns in us all." The drums changed rhythm, deep, slow, ceremonial. The villagers began to chant her name, not as mourning but as a celebration of resilience. Amara, the Fire Queen. Amara who rose from ashes. Amara who taught us light. The sky above shimmered with lightning, though no rain fell. The people gasped as the wind picked up, swirling around them in gentle circles. Sparks from the fire danced upward, hundreds of them glowing like stars. Adaora lifted her eyes and whispered into the wind, "She's here." The flames bent slightly, forming the faint shape of a woman, tall, graceful, surrounded by a soft glow. Her face was calm, her smile eternal. Then, just as quickly as it appeared, the fire straightened again, leaving behind only warmth and silence. The people stood in awe. Children clutched their parents' hands and even the elders bowed. From that night on, it was said that Amara's spirit had become the guardian flame of the village, protecting them from drought, war and sorrow. Whenever hardship came, the people would light a single candle and whisper, "Rise, Fire Queen." And every time the wind would stir. Years later, when Adaora passed peacefully in her sleep, the villagers gathered to honor her. They built her resting place beside Amara's old home, now a sacred site surrounded by wildflowers. On the stone above her grave, they carved her final words. "Let the fire that burns within us never die." As dusk fell that evening, Nena, now a young woman, walked to the riverbank where Amara once stood. She carried a small flame in her palm, shielding it from the breeze. She looked to the sky, which blazed with orange and purple hues. "Grandmother," she whispered, "the fire still burns." A gentle gust of wind passed over the water, and the flame in her hand flickered but did not go out. It glowed brighter, reflected in the calm river, and in that reflection, for the briefest moment, she saw Amara's face smiling back. The drums began to play again in the distance, soft and steady. The people sang their song of rising, their voices carrying through the valley, echoing the same promise that had endured through generations. "Burn us and we will rise. Break us and we will shine. For light is not what we see. It's what we become." And as night fell over the village, the fires burned long after the singing stopped, a sea of light shimmering beneath the stars. Some said they could still see a faint trail of smoke curling upward, forming the shape of a crown before vanishing into the heavens. The legend of Amara, the woman who rose from ashes, was no longer a story. It was a truth written in the hearts of her people. The fire had never died. It never would.